The blizzard had been raging for 36 hours when Marcus Aldrich first spotted them through the whipping snow. 47 newborn calves, huddled inside what looked like enormous bread loaves, scattered across his pasture. Steam rose from the strange domed structures as if they were breathing. While neighboring ranches reported catastrophic losses, every single one of Marcus's calves was alive. The structures shouldn't have worked. Everyone said they were impossible. Yet here they stood, defying every rule of winter survival that 3 generations of Dakota ranchers had sworn by. As Marcus trudged closer through knee-deep drifts, he could hear something that made his blood freeze. Dr. Hendrix's truck engine cutting through the howling wind, heading straight toward his property. 3 months earlier, Marcus had been just another failing rancher drowning in a sea of veterinary bills and insurance claims. The Aldrich Ranch had been in his family for 60 years, but each winter brought the same devastating cycle. Newborn calves freezing to death despite expensive heated barns and round-the-clock monitoring. His neighbors faced the same losses, but they'd accepted it as the cost of ranching in South Dakota. Marcus couldn't accept losing 40% of his herd every year. Not when Elena worked double shifts at the clinic to keep them afloat. Not when his father's legacy hung by a thread. The idea had come to him during the worst night of his life. February 14th, when he'd lost 12 calves in a single blizzard, despite following every traditional method. He'd been sitting in his kitchen at 3 in the morning, staring at a pile of unpaid bills, when Elena mentioned something about Inuit survival techniques. They build shelters that actually get warmer inside, she'd said absently, while bandaging his frost-bitten fingers. Something about trapped air and natural insulation. That's when Marcus started researching. Not traditional ranching methods, but ancient survival techniques. Igloos, snow caves, thermal dynamics. The more he read, the crazier his idea became. What if he could create the same principle using the most abundant resource on his ranch? By March, he'd built his first prototype in secret. A dome-shaped structure made entirely of hay bales, carefully engineered to trap warm air while allowing just enough ventilation. He'd tested it with thermometers, monitoring internal temperatures for weeks. The results defied everything he'd been taught about livestock protection. But when word spread through town about Marcus's hay igloos, the ridicule had been merciless. Dr. Hendrix, the county's most respected veterinarian, had publicly called them agricultural suicide. Other ranchers laughed openly at feed store meetings. Aldrich has finally lost his mind, they whispered. Now, as the worst blizzard in 20 years finally subsided, Marcus stood vindicated among his impossible shelters. Every calf alive, every neighbor proven wrong. But as Dr. Hendrix's truck door slammed in the distance, Marcus realized his real fight was just beginning. Dr. Hendrix stepped out of his truck, wearing the same expression he reserved for terminal diagnoses. His expensive winter coat and polished boots looked absurd against the backdrop of Marcus's hay domes, but his clipboard meant business. 3 other vehicles pulled up behind him, disgorging the county agricultural inspector, the bank representative, and Tom Morrison from the biggest ranch in the county. They hadn't come to congratulate him. "Aldrich, we need to talk," Dr. Hendrix called out, his voice cutting through the wind. His breath formed angry clouds in the frigid air. "The county received multiple complaints about unauthorized livestock structures on your property, allegations of animal endangerment and violation of agricultural safety codes." Marcus felt his stomach drop even as his calves bleated contentedly from inside their warm shelters. He'd known this moment would come, but not this soon. Not when he'd just proven everyone wrong. The 4 men approached with the measured steps of an execution squad, their faces grim with purpose. "Every one of my calves is alive," Marcus said, gesturing toward the hay domes, "while your clients lost dozens last night. How exactly is that endangerment?" Tom Morrison stepped forward, his weathered face twisted with something between fury and embarrassment. His ranch had lost 43 calves in the blizzard, and the whole county knew it. "Those contraptions aren't approved structures, Marcus. You can't just build whatever you want and call it livestock protection. There are regulations, standards." The agricultural inspector, a thin man named Phillips, was already taking photographs and making notes. He walked around the nearest hay dome like he was documenting a crime scene. "Mr. Aldrich, these structures aren't listed in any approved building materials database. We have no safety standards for hay-based animal shelters." "Because nobody's tried it before," Marcus shot back. "That doesn't make it wrong." Dr. Hendrix pulled out a thick folder from his clipboard. "Actually, it does. I have signed statements from 6 veterinarians stating that these structures pose serious health risks to livestock. Potential for mold exposure, respiratory issues, structural collapse. The county can shut down your operation immediately if we determine imminent danger to animal welfare. Marcus stared at the folder, his mind racing. 6 veterinarians. They'd organized against him before he'd even had a chance to prove his concept worked. The establishment was closing ranks, protecting their traditional methods and expensive equipment sales. His success threatened their entire business model. I want to inspect the interior of these structures, Dr. Hendricks continued, pulling on latex gloves. Full documentation for the county review board. Any resistance will be noted as obstruction of official agricultural safety procedures. Elena appeared at Marcus's side, having approached from the house without him noticing. Her nursing training had taught her to read medical situations quickly, and she could see the trap being laid. I assume you have a warrant for this inspection? She asked calmly. The 4 men exchanged glances. Phillips cleared his throat. This is a routine agricultural safety inspection based on filed complaints. Filed by whom? Elena pressed. Nobody answered, but as Dr. Hendricks reached toward the entrance of the nearest hay dome, one of the calves inside let out a healthy, vigorous bellow that echoed across the snow-covered pasture, the sound of life thriving against impossible odds. That healthy bellow stopped Dr. Hendricks cold. In 30 years of veterinary practice, he'd never heard a newborn calf sound so robust after a blizzard like the one they'd just endured. His hand hesitated inches from the hay dome's entrance, and Marcus caught something unexpected flickering across his face. Not anger or professional skepticism, but genuine curiosity. The complaints were filed yesterday morning, Phillips admitted reluctantly, consulting his tablet. Before the storm hit, anonymous tips through the county agricultural hotline. Marcus felt the pieces clicking together like a rifle bolt sliding into place. Yesterday morning, before anyone could see if these structures actually worked, before the blizzard proved anything, he looked directly at Tom Morrison. Somebody wanted me shut down before I had a chance to succeed. Tom's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Dr. Hendricks was already ducking through the entrance of the nearest hay dome, his flashlight beam cutting through the dim interior. Marcus held his breath, waiting for criticism, condemnation, anything that would justify the coordinated attack on his innovation. Instead, silence stretched for nearly a minute before Dr. Hendricks emerged, his expression completely transformed. The certainty had drained from his face, replaced by something much more dangerous to Marcus's enemies: professional fascination. The internal temperature is 68 degrees, he said quietly, checking his digital thermometer. Humidity levels are optimal. No visible mold or respiratory irritants. He looked up at Marcus with new eyes. How did you calculate the ventilation ratios? Trial and error, Marcus replied. But that wasn't entirely true. He'd spent months researching thermal dynamics, studying military survival manuals, even consulting with engineers through online forums. The hay igloos weren't random inspiration. They were carefully designed structures based on solid scientific principles. Tom Morrison stepped forward aggressively. One good night doesn't prove anything, Hendricks. These things could collapse, catch fire, cause all kinds of problems. We need them torn down before they kill livestock. But Dr. Hendricks was already moving to the second dome, then the third, his inspection becoming more thorough and professional with each structure. Phillips followed behind, photographing everything, his earlier hostility replaced by methodical documentation. The bank representative hung back, making phone calls and looking increasingly uncomfortable. Elena moved closer to Marcus. Tom Morrison's been buying up smaller ranches all year, she whispered. If you prove there's a cheap way to stop winter losses, nobody will need to sell to him. That's when everything crystallized for Marcus. This wasn't about agricultural safety or proper procedures. Tom Morrison had built his empire on other ranchers' failures, buying distressed properties at rock-bottom prices when winter losses made operations unsustainable. Marcus's success threatened the entire business model that had made Morrison the richest man in 3 counties. Dr. Hendricks emerged from the 4th dome with something that looked dangerously close to admiration. Marcus, I need to understand your construction process. The thermal efficiency here is remarkable. In all honesty, I've never seen anything like it. Tom Morrison's face had gone red with rage, but before he could respond, the bank representative approached with his phone still pressed to his ear. His expression suggested that the conversation hadn't gone well. "We have a problem," the banker said grimly. The banker ended his call and approached the group with the deliberate steps of a man delivering bad news. Richard Clemens had been handling ranch loans for First Dakota Bank for 15 years, and Marcus had never seen him look this uncomfortable. The phone in his hand buzzed repeatedly, but he ignored it. "Marcus, I just spoke with my regional manager," Clemens began, his voice strained. "There's been a development with your loan status. Effective immediately, the bank is calling in your note. Full payment required within 30 days. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His ranch loan wasn't due for another 18 months, and his payments had been current despite the struggles. "That's impossible, Richard. We have a contract. I've never missed a payment." "I know," Clemens replied, genuinely distressed. "But there's a clause about agricultural safety violations that triggers immediate acceleration. If the county determines your operation poses a risk to livestock, the bank can protect its investment by demanding full repayment." Marcus felt the trap closing around him. Tom Morrison stood nearby with barely concealed satisfaction, while Dr. Hendricks continued his methodical examination of the hay domes. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Someone had orchestrated this entire sequence, using bureaucracy as a weapon. "How much notice did you have about this inspection?" Elena asked Clemens directly. As a nurse, she'd learned to cut through medical bureaucracy, and financial bureaucracy operated the same way. Clemens shifted uncomfortably. "The bank received notification yesterday that an agricultural safety investigation was pending. Standard procedure is to review loan security when regulatory issues arise." "Yesterday," Marcus repeated. "The same day anonymous complaints were filed. Before the storm. Before anyone could see if my structures actually worked." He looked around the group. This whole thing was planned. Dr. Hendricks emerged from his fifth dome inspection. His professional demeanor now completely shifted. "Marcus, I need to be honest with you. These structures are remarkable. The thermal efficiency, the ventilation design, the moisture control. Everything indicates sophisticated engineering. I've been practicing veterinary medicine for 30 years, and I've never seen newborn calves this healthy after a blizzard this severe." Tom Morrison's face darkened. "Hendricks, you can't be serious. Those things are fire hazards, structural risks. What happens when they collapse on livestock? They're more structurally sound than most traditional shelters I've inspected." Dr. Hendricks replied firmly. "The hay bale construction distributes weight evenly, and the dome shape is inherently stable. From a veterinary standpoint, I can't find any basis for the safety complaints." Phillips looked up from his tablet, clearly frustrated. "But we still have the regulatory issue. These structures aren't in the approved building materials database. Without proper classification, the county can't authorize their use." Marcus realized he was caught in a perfect bureaucratic trap. His innovation worked, the veterinarian confirmed it, but regulatory agencies couldn't approve what they hadn't seen before. Meanwhile, his bank loan was being called in based on safety violations that didn't actually exist. Helena stepped closer to Dr. Hendricks. "What would it take to get these structures properly classified and approved?" Dr. Hendricks considered the question carefully. "Independent testing, structural analysis, formal documentation. Could take months to work through the regulatory process." He paused, studying Marcus with new respect. "But there might be another way." Dr. Hendricks pulled Marcus aside, away from the group clustered around Phillips and his tablet. His voice dropped to a whisper, but his words carried the weight of professional conviction. "There's an emergency livestock protection provision in county code. If I certify these structures as essential for animal welfare during extreme weather conditions, they can operate under temporary authorization while going through formal approval." Marcus felt a spark of hope, but Tom Morrison had obviously overheard. He stepped forward aggressively, his face flushed with anger. "Hendricks, you're talking about putting your medical license on the line for some amateur's backyard experiment. Think about what you're risking." "I'm thinking about 47 healthy calves that should be dead right now." "Doctor," Hendricks shot back, "every traditional shelter in this county failed last night. Every single one. But these hay domes worked perfectly." He turned to Phillips. "I'm prepared to sign emergency authorization paperwork today." Phillips looked genuinely torn between his regulatory responsibilities and the evidence in front of him. The calves were clearly thriving, their vigorous sounds echoing from inside the warm structures. But bureaucracy didn't bend easily, especially when powerful interests were involved. Tom Morrison played his final card. Richard, you need to understand something. If the bank doesn't call in that loan today, I'll be moving my accounts to First National. All of them. That includes my ranch operations, my equipment loans, and my land development investments. He paused for emphasis. We're talking about $12 million in business. Richard Clemens went pale. Marcus watched the banker's resolve crumble in real time as he calculated the financial impact. $12 million in lost business would destroy his career and probably cost the bank their regional license. Tom Morrison had turned the meeting into a hostage situation. Tom, you can't be serious, Elena said, stepping forward. You're willing to destroy a family's livelihood just to maintain your monopoly on distressed ranch properties. I'm protecting legitimate agricultural standards, Tom replied smoothly. Marcus's reckless experimentation puts the entire county's livestock industry at risk. What happens when other ranchers try to copy these contraptions and fail? Who's liable when animals die? Doctor? Hendricks looked around the group, his medical training warring with political reality. He'd spent his career following protocols, but the evidence was undeniable. These structures worked better than anything he'd seen in 3 decades of practice. Marcus watched the bureaucratic machine grinding toward his destruction. Within 30 days, he'd lose everything his family had built over 3 generations. Not because his innovation failed, but because it succeeded too well and threatened the wrong people. Elena caught his eye and nodded toward the house. She'd obviously thought of something, and her expression suggested it involved taking significant risks. Marcus had learned to trust his wife's instincts, especially when conventional options had been exhausted. As the group continued arguing about regulations and liability, Marcus noticed something else. Pickup trucks were gathering on the road beyond his property line. Word was spreading through the ranching community about the confrontation, and people were coming to see for themselves what Marcus Aldrich had built in his pasture. Elena's plan was simple but dangerous. While the men argued about regulations and liability, she'd been counting the pickup trucks gathering along the road. 12 vehicles so far, and more arriving every few minutes. Word traveled fast in ranch country, especially when someone claimed to have solved the winter loss problem that plagued every cattle operation in South Dakota. Marcus, she whispered, we need those other ranchers to see the proof for themselves. Right now, before Tom Morrison can spin this as some kind of safety crisis. Marcus understood immediately. Public opinion could override bureaucratic pressure, but only if people witnessed the evidence firsthand. Tom Morrison's power came from other ranchers' desperation. If they saw a real solution to their winter losses, his business model collapsed overnight. Dr. Hendricks was still examining the structures, his professional curiosity overriding political considerations. Each dome showed the same results. Internal temperatures holding steady at 68 degrees, perfect humidity levels, healthy, vigorous calves that should have died in the blizzard. The thermal efficiency numbers are remarkable, Dr. Hendricks said to Phillips. These structures maintain optimal conditions using nothing but passive solar gain and trapped air circulation. No heating costs, no electrical systems to fail. Phillips looked uncomfortable. His job required following established procedures, but the evidence contradicted every assumption about livestock protection. I still need to document regulatory compliance issues for the county board. Tom Morrison stepped closer, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Phillips, think carefully about your next report. The county depends on tax revenue from successful ranching operations. You don't want to be responsible for approving something that could destroy the entire industry. But Elena had already moved into action. She walked directly toward the road where ranchers were gathering, her nursing background giving her natural authority in crisis situations. Marcus watched her approach the first group of vehicles with the same confidence she'd used to handle difficult patients. Jim Kowalski, Sarah Chen, Mike Rodriguez, she called out, recognizing neighbors from church and community events. Marcus wants to show you something that could change everything about winter calf protection. The ranchers climbed out of their trucks, curious and skeptical in equal measure. Everyone knew about Marcus's reputation for unconventional ideas, but they also knew about their own devastating losses from the previous night's blizzard. Sarah Chen approached first. Her operation had lost 36 calves, and her face showed the exhaustion of someone who'd spent all night fighting a losing battle against nature. Elena, we heard there was some kind of inspection happening. County trucks, bank people. Is Marcus in trouble? Come see for yourself, Elena replied. Then decide if he's the one who should be worried. As the growing group of ranchers walked toward the hay domes, Dr. Hendricks emerged from his latest inspection. His expression had shifted completely from professional skepticism to genuine amazement. He approached Marcus with something close to reverence. "I've been measuring thermal efficiency for 30 years, Doctor," Hendricks said quietly. "These structures achieve better climate control than heated barns costing 50 times more to build and operate." He paused, looking around at the gathering crowd. "Marcus, you've reduced winter calf losses by over 90% using the simplest possible technology." Tom Morrison's face went white. The exact statistic he'd been trying to suppress had just been spoken aloud by the county's most respected veterinarian, in front of a dozen neighboring ranchers who'd lost hundreds of calves the night before. The crowd of ranchers moved toward the hay domes like investigators approaching a crime scene. Sarah Chen reached the nearest structure first, her weathered hands testing the exterior walls. The hay bales felt solid, tightly compressed, engineered rather than randomly stacked. "How much did this cost you to build?" Jim Kowalski asked, running his hand along the curved entrance. His own heated barn had cost $80,000 and still lost calves every winter. "Less than $300 in materials," Marcus replied. "Most of it hay I already had. The rest was hardware store supplies for ventilation and weatherproofing." A collective murmur ran through the group. $300 versus the tens of thousands they'd all spent on traditional shelters that failed routinely. Mike Rodriguez ducked inside the nearest dome, his flashlight beam revealing healthy calves clustered together in perfect comfort. "Internal temperature is warmer than my house," Rodriguez called out. "And listen to how strong these calves sound. Mine that survived are weak, stressed, barely moving." Dr. Hendricks seized the moment. "This design achieves what we've been trying to accomplish with expensive technology. Better results at a fraction of the cost." He looked directly at the other ranchers. "Every operation here could implement this system immediately." Tom Morrison realized he was losing control of the situation. His voice rose with desperation. "You're all talking about copying unproven structures based on one lucky night. What happens when these things collapse? When calves suffocate? When insurance companies refuse to cover experimental shelters?" But Sarah Chen had emerged from her inspection with something Marcus had never seen in her eyes before. Hope. Real hope after years of accepting devastating winter losses as inevitable. "Tom, I lost 36 calves last night using methods you recommended," she said firmly. "Marcus didn't lose a single calf using hay and basic engineering. I know which approach I'm trusting next winter." The bank representative, Richard Clemens, had been making frantic phone calls during the impromptu demonstration. His face showed growing panic as he realized the political dynamics were shifting rapidly. Tom Morrison's threat to withdraw $12 million meant nothing if the entire ranching community turned against him. Elena approached Clemens directly. "Richard, how many of these ranchers have loans with your bank? How many of them just discovered a way to reduce their biggest annual loss by 90%? She gestured toward the enthusiastic crowd surrounding the hay domes. "Which scenario is better for loan security? Supporting innovation that works, or backing the man who profits from everyone else's failures?" Phillips, the agricultural inspector, found himself in an impossible position. His regulatory framework had no category for structures this simple and effective. Every protocol demanded lengthy approval processes for new livestock protection methods, but the evidence was undeniable, and the community support was overwhelming. "I need guidance from the county supervisor," Phillips said weakly. "This situation falls outside standard inspection procedures." "While you're getting guidance," Dr. Hendricks announced to the gathered crowd, "I'm issuing emergency veterinary authorization for these structures. Based on direct observation, they provide superior animal welfare compared to any alternative I've inspected." Tom Morrison played his final desperate card. "You're all making a terrible mistake. When these contraptions fail, and animals die, the liability will destroy every operation here. Insurance companies will blacklist anyone using unauthorized shelter designs." But Jim Kowalski had heard enough. He'd been ranching for 40 years and had never seen anything like the healthy calves thriving in Marcus's simple hay domes. "Tom, the only mistake would be ignoring something that actually works because it threatens your business model." The crowd of ranchers began asking Marcus detailed questions about construction techniques, material costs, and design specifications. Tom Morrison stood isolated, watching his empire of distressed property acquisition crumble as his victims discovered they didn't need to be victims anymore. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his pasture surveying 43 new hay dome structures scattered across neighboring properties. What had started as desperate innovation had become the standard winter calf protection system for ranchers across 3 counties. His phone buzzed constantly with calls from operations as far away as Montana and Wyoming, all requesting construction plans for the South Dakota hay igloos. Richard Clemens had called off the loan acceleration within hours of witnessing the community demonstration. First Dakota Bank now featured Marcus's innovation in their agricultural lending brochures, promoting cutting-edge ranch efficiency solutions. The bank had even offered him a construction loan to formalize hay dome manufacturing as a side business. Dr. Hendricks had documented the winter survival statistics that made Marcus locally famous and nationally recognized. The final numbers were staggering: 94% calf survival rate during the worst winter in 20 years, compared to county averages of 58% using traditional methods. Agricultural engineering programs from 3 universities had sent teams to study the thermal dynamics and structural design principles. Tom Morrison's land acquisition empire had collapsed completely. Without desperate ranchers needing to sell distressed properties, his primary revenue stream vanished. The bank foreclosed on his over-leveraged holdings by spring, and he'd left the county entirely, selling his remaining assets to pay creditors. The power structure that had dominated local agriculture for decades crumbled in a single season. Elena had returned to part-time nursing, no longer needing to work double shifts to keep the ranch afloat. She spent her extra time managing the overwhelming correspondence from ranchers worldwide who wanted to implement Marcus's design. They'd established a simple website with construction plans, material lists, and thermal efficiency specifications, all available for free. The county had fast-tracked regulatory approval for hay dome structures, creating an entirely new category in their building codes. Phillips, the agricultural inspector, now used Marcus's ranch as a model demonstration site for innovative livestock protection methods. What had been bureaucratic resistance became bureaucratic support almost overnight. Marcus walked among his original hay domes, listening to the contented sounds of healthy cattle. The calves that had survived that brutal February blizzard were now strong yearlings, living proof that simple innovation could overcome systemic problems. His phone rang with another request for construction guidance, this time from a rancher in Nebraska who'd lost half his herd the previous winter. As he answered the call, Marcus caught sight of Elena hanging laundry behind the house, the same confident smile on her face that had sustained him through the worst moments of their struggle. The ranch that had nearly bankrupted them was now profitable, sustainable, and debt-free. More importantly, they'd proven that individual innovation could challenge established systems and win. The hay igloos dotted the landscape like monuments to practical creativity, each one representing a rancher who refused to accept that winter losses were inevitable. Marcus had solved a problem that had plagued cattle operations for generations, using nothing more than hay, basic engineering principles, and the determination to prove everyone wrong. His crazy idea had saved not just his own operation, but transformed an entire industry. Sometimes the most powerful innovations came from the simplest solutions. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale, where courage and innovation collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.